Hey everyone, how are you doing? I thought it would be fun and interesting, maybe slightly masochistic, to make a video today reading out one-star reviews of my favorite books of 2018. So I'll go through all 10 books that I picked as my favorites for 2018 and read the one-star reviews of them. Some of them have multiple one-star reviews. I'll just read one-star review. One of these books overwhelmingly has the most one-star reviews of any of the books on my list. So it's interesting to see how many different ones there are. So yeah, I just thought this would be a good video to make. I first saw it when I saw Mercedes made this video, and she got the idea from watching Kate, who also made this video, and so I'll link both of those videos below, and I think a whole bunch of other people have done it because it's such a great idea, it's such a great concept, isn't it? And I think it's exactly the sort of thing that we should be doing on BookTube. So yeah, this will hopefully be really fun. And of course, you know, while I believe that each reading experience of a book is different, everyone brings their own thoughts and feelings and experiences to a book, and so we all read books differently. But you know, these are very personal books to me. They really struck my heart, and so I'm slightly worried that my responses might be either really sad at the end of this video, my heart might be broken in a million pieces all over the floor, or I might get a bit angry and you might see steams coming out of my ears and flames on the sides of my face because I will be, I'm not going to be able to control my facial expressions as I'm reading these one-star reviews. So I'll get into them, but I'll also link below my favorite books of the year videos so you can see my responses to all these books if you want to. And the first one is Women Talking by Miriam Toews. So this had 75 one-star reviews, and I'm not totally surprised at that because I recognize this isn't a book for everyone, and a few books on my list I recognize really won't be books for everyone, that people will have issues with reading some of these books, just because I know they're not the sort of stories that that everyone's gonna want to go into for sort of escapism or to get certain things out of, or people might object to certain aspects of the content. But anyway, I'll read this one-star review of Women Talking. And it starts with, I don't know how this book got published. A fictitious account of actual events, a dark and disturbing subject with a plethora of 4- and 5-star reviews. What could go wrong? Well, in the case of this book, everything. A lot of these reviews I think are going to be heavily laced with sarcasm. The entire book is spelled out in the description. 8 Mennonite women discover that themselves, along with 100 plus other women and children in their community, have been drugged and raped by the community men over the course of 2 years. These 8 women gather secretly to discuss what they are going to do now that the truth has come to light. They have 3 choices: stay and do nothing, stay and fight, or leave. What follows is the secret conversation as told by the meetings taken by August Epp. Although he is a man, August is the only person they can trust that can read and write. The entire book is made up of one conversation, or I should say the minutes of one conversation. This leaves the style of the story less than savory. Long ramblings of what is, in my experience, not consistent with the usual format when taking minutes. August also includes his personal thoughts, which is counterintuitive as well as distracting. The women have unusual names and all seem to be related in some way or other, leaving it nearly impossible to decipher who is who for most of the story. The same 3 choices are pondered over and over with little progress towards a decision until the very end. I felt like I read the same conversation 100 times. Religion is prevalent in everything these women discuss as they try to figure out how to save themselves without falling out of God's grace. I would dare say that 3/4 of this story revolves around religion, and that alone is enough to turn me off from this book. While the real-life account of what happened to these women is compelling, the author ruined any chance for the reader to connect and become invested in their plight with an unbearable format and lackluster character development. Now for the positive. It is a very short book. If I had to choose an audience for this book, it would be Christian Women's Church Book Club. Right. What? The women, the characters in these stories, and the women in real life, they were part of a religious community that didn't have any contact. Well, the women didn't have any contact with the outside world, and the women didn't speak English or any other common language in the world. They only spoke this antiquated language that no one else in the world could speak. So these women, literally all their lives, because it's such a heavily religious community, their entire lives were revolved around this religion, everything they had known or experienced. So what do you want them to talk about? What do you want them to discuss? The latest Netflix series? I mean, what are they going to discuss other than religion and their struggles with faith? I mean, they do discuss other things too, actually. They talk a lot about disagreements within the community and different people's personalities and oh my goodness. And as I said before, I'm not a religious person. I don't have any faith, but I was able to connect with their experience because they're human beings, and I could imagine myself into their plight. If this was all I had ever known, I would be having these massive religious struggles as well, to try to decide what should be done now. So, and the point about the women having unusual names, like, well, it's a different community, it's a different place. And I do understand and sympathize with that it can be difficult when reading, like whenever I read Dostoevsky, I can get really muddled and confused about who is who because the names are slightly unfamiliar to me and there's a ton of them, and so it can take some time to figure out who is who. But that's really just on the different experiences of the readers, and it's not the author's fault and the fault of the book. And really, it should be you that's as a reader who's just paying attention to all of that. So okay. Well, there's that first review. And on to the second review. A lot of the other reviews I'm going to read are much shorter than that. So is Swanson by Kelleigh Greenberg-Jephcott. And this only has one star review, as at the time of filming this, obviously. Other one-star reviews might be appearing for all these books in subsequent months and stuff. But here is a review of Swanson. And there's more sarcasm. One way of looking at a book concerning the last magnum opus of Truman Capote's life is that the read will never be close to the power, wit, intention, and achievement of the original. One other way of looking at this book, however, is that while it wants to excoriate Capote for digging up a load of socialite gossip and disguising it as fiction, these pages do get too close to doing that as well. So we get a fictional device of a royal we kind of narrator, an unusual first-person plural, to lambast the man for spreading the dirt. But we also get quotes from the dirt, with this author clearly wanting her cake and to eat it, and to throw it into the faces of the long dead. So several facts remain. Facts. One, that these people would be D-list celebrities these days or pompous it girls, and they are of no interest now and would never have been of interest to me then. Fact 2, there are 2 very good films if you want to explore the character of Capote. Fact 3, this clearly wasn't a book for me, and the length of it spreading out in front of me was far too galling to continue. Well, it's dicey territory to resurrect people from the past who have been, you could say, exploited in fiction, and then writing about them yourself, and so you could make the argument that you're exploiting them yourself as well as the author who portrayed them in a book. But it's if I think clearly this person didn't read the entire book, and that's going to be probably an issue with several of these one-star reviews, is that they just gave up on reading the book and so didn't experience the whole thing, which, you don't have to have an opinion of a book, but I think if you'd read the full book, would have known that or at least I thought the author really sympathetically portrayed all these women and their different struggles and thoughts and feelings, as well as Capote, paid him respect as well, while taking issue with what he did and his actions. I mean, he spoke so horribly about a number of people, and so, but I think she does get to his heart a bit of showing him sympathetically that he came from very difficult circumstances, and had a very difficult personality, and and part of this is your own opinion of Capote yourself. If you, as a reader, come into this revering Truman Capote, you will be very sensitive to how he's portrayed, and might feel like the author is skewering him. But the author is obviously a huge fan of Truman Capote, but while recognizing he was a complicated individual, very complicated individual, much more so than many other people of the day. And when I came into reading this book, I'd read and liked some of Truman Capote's stories, but I had big issues with him because Truman Capote said of my favorite author, Joyce Carol Oates, that he actually said this in an interview, that Joyce Carol Oates should be publicly beheaded in a big stadium with everyone watching. So he had some challenging ideas, and so yeah, well, there we go. And the next book I'm going to talk about is Washington Black by S.A. Edugyan. This has 39 one-star reviews, and this review goes, I disliked this book. Besides the use of words I don't want to like, besides the use of words I don't want or like to hear, e.g. N-word, racist words, I know it's time appropriate, but it jolted me and disengaged me from the story every time. That alone got me out of the book, but nothing kept me into the novel. It was a little boring and long. Much of it could have just been short story. I found no joy in reading or learning from this book. I disliked my commute when reading it, and I never tried to read it at home. I finished 6 other books while reading this, thus 1 star. Well, like the reviewer acknowledges herself, these were words that the book takes place during on a plantation during slavery. It's there's terms that were used that are not palatable today and are difficult to read about. But yeah, obviously that was true to the time. So if you're a hypersensitive person, yeah, maybe it would be difficult to read this book. But I'm really surprised that she found it boring. I mean, I found it so exciting and adventurous, the different places and stages of the main character Washington Black's life that he goes into. So yeah, that's a bit puzzling, but I guess that's just a different experience of reading a book. And I wonder if she would have got more into it if she had read it at home rather than her commute, because I think there are certain books which aren't don't really lend themselves to reading in that sort of format of being on a train or something with lots of other people and being jostled and being interrupted constantly and having all these distractions around you. So but yeah, that's okay. Well, there she goes. So the next book is Fire Sermon by Jamie Quatro, a novel I read at the very beginning of last year and loved so much. There are 70 one-star reviews of this book. This is a very short review. It just goes, strange. Full stop. That's strange. I was not expecting a mixture of poetry, religion, fiction, and sexual content in one book. Not my idea of a good book. Okay. The thing about strange, I mean, personally, I enjoy fiction or writing that's a bit strange, a bit offbeat, and that goes on a subject or approaches the subject from a point of view that you wouldn't really expect. I enjoy, but to vilify it for being a mixture of a number of different things. How dare a book be all poetry and about religion and fiction and have sexual content in it as well? Whoa. But yeah, this is another thing, like women talking about religious subjects and talking about faith. And, and again, if you're really off-put by questions of faith, and then yeah, I could see how you'd have an issue with reading this book. But again, as a non-believer, I recognize, like 3/4 of the world believes in God or religion, and so I think it should be taken seriously and discussed in fiction, and not just because it's not a subject we want to have read about. Yeah, so strange that your response is strange. I would counter to this reviewer. The next review is Problems by Jade Sharma, and now this is one of the books that I acknowledged when I read it. This isn't going to be a book for everyone. Not everyone is going to like this book for I think reasons which will become evident. So there are 64 one-star reviews of this. The one I picked, it goes, a first novel about an FMA student by an MFA grad. What could go wrong? We're back to the sarcasm. Dark, yes. Raw, yes. Funny, nope. Not even remotely funny. I don't think I smiled once in 80 pages. Wish I could remember which reviewer recommended this book, and I'd blacklist them. Okay, well, I get really annoyed when people pick on authors for going through a creative writing program to write their book. It's an art, it's a craft, there's training to it. And yeah, maybe some books can feel like they're almost a bit formulaic in how they approach their subject and style of their writing because they came out of a creative writing class. But every book is original and unique, and so yeah, and yeah, it is a very dark and she gets into some very raw feelings in it, and but maybe the humor thing is just a personal thing of whether you like that sort of writing in a book or not. I did find some passages of this hugely funny, and I wonder if this reviewer got to, there's a section in the middle where the main character goes to a Thanksgiving dinner at her in-laws, which I found so hilarious. It was amazingly funny. I wonder if she got to that part, because that part is incredibly funny. But then there are other parts of this book, particularly I think the last half or last third of the book is very serious and dark, and you won't be laughing very much. But it showed to me a well-rounded character and a well-rounded writer writing about these different subjects. So there you go. Next is Memento Mori by Muriel Spark, a classic book published in the late 50s, and which I read for the first time last year. And there are there's 77 one-star reviews of this. So mostly unlikable characters. I considered abandoning it, but it wasn't a long book, and I was reading it on my lunch break and didn't have anything else to read, so I stuck it out. But if it had been breakfast reading rather than lunch, I'd have abandoned the book for the back of a cereal box. Ooh, burn. I'm really surprised at this, because my experience reading this book was I read it aloud to my partner while we were driving through Scotland on a road trip, and I read the entire book out loud, and we found it so funny. We were just like laughing all the time, and it's such a great experience reading a book aloud, and especially a funny book, as this book is, and it's very darkly funny. There's very dark humor in it, and the thing about characters, not liking the characters, that's an odd response I find in a lot of readers who are like, oh, I don't like the characters, so I don't like the book, that they're mean or bad or problematic characters. But personally, I love reading about characters that are awful, because these are people I wouldn't ever want to meet in real life, but I find it fascinating to read about them because you see such a different perspective that you wouldn't allow yourself to see in real life. If I met people like this, I would be like, I don't want to spend any time with these people, but I have to spend time with them in the book, and thus get to know them in a way that, yeah, and see different kinds of people that I don't know in real life. And you know, that's the thing I really enjoy about fiction, learning about people that I don't know in real life. So there we go. So next we have Cersei by Madeline Miller. And poor Madeline Miller, this is the book that overwhelmingly has more one-star reviews than any other book on this list. It has 544 one-star reviews. That is a huge amount, and I'm quite surprised at this. But you know, she's a very popular author, so I guess she'll have her dissenters and people that'll go to this book expecting to like it, and I guess just not getting out of it what they hoped or wanted. So this book review is by a man, and he says, Circe is a gorgeous, lush retelling, chocked full of beautiful prose and imaginative, fully realized characters. Miller creates a plot that is akin to standing in quicksand, never fully feeling that you've regressed or progressed in the story of Circe. The characters and writing serve as a well-deserved save from the plot, however. It was not enough to save me from the treacherous claws of this tedious plot. Well, that's very confusing. So he likes the way that Madeline Miller writes. He likes the way that she creates her characters, but he finds the plot horrible. And even though he acknowledges that it's a retelling, the stories in this book literally are Greek, ancient Greek myths that have been told and retold many times over the centuries. So it doesn't criticizing the plots of this novel is like criticizing the plots of all Greek mythology, which that's a stance, that's a choice to take. But yeah, so Madeline Miller sort of dips into all these different Greek mythology where Circe plays a part and tells it from her perspective. So yeah, it's really strange, that point of view, because yeah, I found the way she sort of structured it and put all these different stories together to be really interesting. You see the evolution of Circe's character over many years, and she's an immortal being, so she lives for hundreds of years. You see her progression, how her character changes over time. And there's some very exciting things that happen in the plot. There's a big battle with a monster. There's a lot of treachery, and there's a lot of sex, and to find the plot bad, it's really strange. Okay, now, oh dear, Hazards of Time Travel by Joyce Carol Oates, as I said before, my favorite author. And there are 37 one-star reviews of this novel, and this review is written in the form of a poem. It's very creative here, by a man, I guess, or at least it's a picture of a man. This applies to all the books I have reviewed, but especially this work, which presents itself a breathtaking ode to the mediocre. The writer is a rote beast, absent any and all measured, thoughtful and imaginative processes. Written human interaction is a redundancy of projected absurdity. The author works sentences into platitude, riddled paragraphs, the reader basking in a delusional rapture. #poem. What? What is that about? I don't really know where to engage with this. Absent of thoughtful or imaginative processes, it's a dystopian novel. She imagines this whole future where society has become a completely totalitarian, horrible regime, and then the main character is sent back in time to the late 50s and 60s. So, is that not imaginative enough? I don't know. I guess I'm not sure what this reviewer was trying to get at. So next, Sight by Jessie Greengrass, another book I loved and read early on last year. Very short review. Run-on sentences and a main character that needed a therapist. I found nothing in this book that has it up for consideration on the Man Booker long list. Ooh, was that a slight stab at me? Because I was the one that read this book early on last year before it was even published, and made a whole video declaring it was going to win the Booker Prize last year, which of course it didn't. It wasn't even listed for the Booker Prize. So yeah, I know that making that video, I hugely drummed up a lot of people's expectations for it. You know, maybe that I put some people's expectations way too high. And obviously I did, because yeah, some people, you know, including friends of mine, people I really like, other booktubers I really like, have read this book and really didn't like it. So yeah, that's tricky and difficult, and sorry. But yeah, but you know, when I made that video and talked about this book, it was another book that I acknowledged. Not everyone's gonna love this book. I know not everyone's gonna love it. It's a very introspective book. It sort of purposefully limits what it talks about. So yeah, sorry. Okay, the last review is Ghost Wall by Sarah Moss. I really didn't like this, and only finished it because it was so short. The historical reenactment was a thin veil for a story of abuse. The subject matter was hard to read, which it should be, but I didn't feel there was any payoff for such a heavy-handed approach. Also, I did come to this book, novella, thinking it would have spooky undertones with bog people and such. None of that. I'd suggest giving this one a hard pass. Okay, well, so yeah, it's, I think there is mention in the synopsis of this book that it deals with characters from like the Bronze Age, from many years ago, as well as characters in the present. And you pretty much only get, except for a very short introduction and some references throughout the book, you only get the perspective of people in the modern day. So if you're going into this expecting maybe like no resurrection of bog people, or finding a community of people that have been hidden away for centuries and have very primitive ways and are, you know, you'll be disappointed because it's not that sort of book. It's more a literary book talking about these people's experiences and making bigger comparisons to sort of political struggles happening in the UK today, and what it means to be British and that sort of thing. So, but I don't know, I guess it's just a sort of how you personally find this book. Personally, I found it thrilling and very creepy in the way it handles this subject matter. And yeah, it is a story of abuse and someone born into a situation and not knowing really anything different because she's so immersed in the teachings of her parents and comes to believe that this is the way life is. But yeah, so it's, I don't know, just different ways of reading the book. So oh, I don't think I mentioned, so how many one-star? There are 11 one-star reviews of Ghost Wall currently, so there we go. So those are the books on my list, but yeah, that it was a bit difficult to, but you know, it's good to challenge ourselves to get other perspectives of books other than our own. But you know, you don't have to like them and you don't have to agree with them. But yeah, obviously I felt something very different. So like I said, if you want to know my thoughts on all these books, you can go watch my video about my 10 favorite books of 2018, and I'll post links to my full reviews of all these books too if you want to see more of my in-depth thoughts. But there we go. But I would love it if you wanted to make this video as well, and of looking at your one-star reviews of your favorite books from last year. I think that'd be really fun exercise to do in the new year, in this bleak January time when all Christmas adornments have come down and it's all about sad, and we're all a bit poor and hungover and yeah, trying to get over things. So yeah, let me know if you make this video as well, so I'd love to watch it. I'd love to see other people do this, or if you just want to post in the comments below your reactions to some one-star reviews that you've read. That would be really interesting and fun. So, but if you really disliked any of my favorite books of the year, I'd love to know your perspective of them as well. You know, maybe be a bit soft in your approach, maybe not so heavy sarcasm or personal attacks on the authors. You know, just more respectful conversation about books. That's what I'm hoping for in 2019. So thank you for watching, and I will speak to you all again very soon. Bye, everyone.